Hello and welcome to the Euranet Plus debate on European Citizens Initiatives. Our program today is presented within the Citizens Corner concept. The debate is produced and hosted by the Euranet Plus and RTBF Belgium, a member of the Euranet Plus network. The debate can be followed from here, from the European Parliament live and on our Euranet Plus Inside website, as well as on our Facebook profile and on Twitter using the hashtag Citizens Corner. My name is Artjoms Konohovs and I am working for the Latvian radio here in Brussels. Joining us today, we have a nice panel of guests giving citizens initiatives stronger teeth. That will be the topic of our discussion today. First, we have Marju LAURISTIN, member of the European Parliament from Estonia, a vice chair of the group of Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament. Then I would like to introduce Sylvia-Yvonne KAUFMANN, member of the European Parliament from Germany, and she is also from the group of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament. Then Mr. György SCHÖPFLIN, member of the European Parliament from Hungary, group of the European People's Party, Christian Democrats, and then to my right, Luc van den Brande, Vice President of the Committee of the Regions and also Special Advisor to the President of the European Commission for the outreach towards the citizens. Welcome. And then we also have Asya Kavrakova, Director of the European Citizen Action Service. We are also joined by the students from the Campus Radio Warsaw, Poland and the UBB Babeș-Bolyai University in Cluj, Romania. And for the first half of the debate, we're going to have Camille from the Campus Radio Warsaw, and for the second half, we're going to have another student joining us later. So far, out of the 56 roughly European Citizens Initiatives submitted to the debate, submitted today to the European Commission, only a few have actually succeeded to get through and succeeded to, and none of them actually, in fact, was followed by the legislative proposal from the Commission. So what's the problem? I would like to start with you, Asa.
Thank you so much. There are a couple of problems that I would like to outline. First, about the instrument as a whole. There is no doubt now, about 40 years after the entry into force of the regulation, that actually the citizens' initiative is not user-friendly. It's simply not made for purpose. It's not fit for purpose, it does not deliver, it's very time and energy consuming for the organizers, it's not very rewarding, and in general it's not cost effective as well. This comes to tell us in one word that there is a need for serious revision of the instrument. On the other hand, I would like also to point out that there is a need for the organizers to be better prepared to use this instrument. This is not an instrument for an everyday use. It's an exceptional instrument which is designed in order to put a suggestion for legislation on the agenda of the European Union, and therefore only those that are really the best prepared in terms of running the campaign and succeeded would be able to enjoy the benefits at the end. One of the problems, just among all of those that I've already listed, is the fact that because there are very few and even none other channels for daily use by citizens directly, this is why also the European Citizen Initiative is charged with so many expectations by both sides, including citizens. And in a way, it makes it very, very difficult to deliver.
As an advisor to the European Commission President, would you agree with this rather harsh statement? It's not user-friendly.
First of all, the delivery is in fact not in place, and not just looking the numbers, and we cannot say that it was a full success. It is an understatement. So I think that we have, and there I agree with our colleague, we have not just to amend some points. There are things to be improved, but I think that a fundamental revision of the ECI instrument is in place. But we have to assess also that there were too great expectations, and may I say also expectations in an antagonism between the aim of the Commission on the one hand and the people, the citizens on the other hand. The ECI finally was in a rushed decision making. There was not a real long deliberative process on, may I say, the ground and the purpose of it. But we have to be clear on this point. From the citizen side, the ECI is not a co-decision instrument. And there, I think the expectation was too high. On the other hand, from the Commission on, it was the will to go for more openness. But as a paradox, it is not an open instrument. On the contrary, the legalistic, the closed approach of the Commission, the assessment, all kind of different rules and impediments, they were leading to, in fact, this result which is not in place. And this is the point where we have to not just make the assessment, but to rethink more fundamentally the tool or the instrument of the ECI.
Madam KAUFMANN, would you agree with the need for the more fundamental rethink of the mechanism and the fact that it's basically not working?
Well, I do agree that we have to revise the regulation. We had a very long and intensive debate here in the European Parliament, and the Parliament, from my point of view, made very good proposals what could be changed after having a certain amount of time, let's say 3 years of experience that the instrument came into force. But on the other side, I have to say we also faced other problems. One, for example, in my point of view, is that a lot of citizens even don't know yet that this instrument is existing and that the European Union, that its institutions are offering this dialogue, are wishing to have ideas from the citizens that they say, how could we ourselves as citizens involve in the whole European integration process? And if citizens don't know that this offer is existing, of course, then we do have a problem. And that's why we were proposing, for example, to have more, in the positive sense, advertisement for that, to have more support for organizers, to have a citizens' initiative working. And I think that not only the institution, but also the member states, we as parliamentarians, the NGOs themselves, a lot of actors do have the responsibility to make this instrument much more known in our societies.
So you are basically saying that the problem is not so much within the instrument itself, but rather with the fact that people don't know about it.
No, we have different issues here, why we are all almost not so satisfied. You know, it's a question of awareness. This instrument is existing. It's an instrument. The regulation itself is, of course, a question of topics. What topics do we focus on? Or it's a question, how our colleague said, how NGOs are organizing themselves. From my point of view, some of them really underestimated the work which is behind to get really 1 million signatures of at least 5 member states.
Madam LAURISTIN, what is your take on this? What do you think is the most crucial problem with the ECI instrument? Why is it not really working?
I think that the problems are much more common and general. They concern also the same kind of situation in the member states. It's the whole problem of direct participation of citizens in the lawmaking. And I think and I foresee that there could be different solutions, more maybe suitable and more effective in digital age. Because we are speaking now a lot about digital single market. But I suppose we have to speak also about digital common European public sphere. There were some efforts made during the previous Commission to have this kind of 3D approach and so on, but it all remains a bit, far away from citizens' real life. And when Sylvia talked about the information, I suppose it all starts with information given to citizens about the work done here, about the real legislative work and real problems and issues. I think that this kind of initiatives also need permanent dialogue. It's not just there are somewhere citizens who decide to ask to do something from Commission. I suppose that could be also Commission who is asking citizens to be active and to give their initiatives, opinions on certain areas where really this kind of horizontal involvement is needed. Because, for example, take labor market issues. They could be issues which are common for all people now in Europe. And there are a lot of situations where people who are working cannot solve them on local level. There are multinationals, there are all those things, and there could be, I suppose, very important issues which could be solved on European level using this instrument for European legislation. And it will be very nice to have, even important to have citizen support for solutions. But here, from other side, I suppose Commission or Parliament should feed the public opinion or public debate with information, with requests, with problems, showing the whole context. And I suppose that here are a lot of situations where, for example, crowdsourcing could be used, and all these other tools to have the live dialogue between citizens and Commission and Parliament, and as a result of that then to have this initiative, so that initiative not just emerging out of the blue because of initiative of some parties or NGOs, but it could be the part of the say ongoing work.
May I?
We have touched on many things, but before this, I would like to invite Mr. SCHÖPFLIN in our conversation and ask you, well, there has been many things mentioned, but underlying to some is the actual political issue here. And that lies with then the fact whether European Commission is actually willing to do anything about it to improve the fact, or to the way this initiative is working. Do you agree with such statement?
It's very hard for me to disagree with this statement. With Mrs. Kaufmann's help, I was the rapporteur, for Parliament's rapporteur on this instrument, and I have to say I'm disappointed. It has not worked out as I had expected it to. In fact, what I see is a growing reluctance on the part of the Commission to make this instrument work. Now, if we go back to the treaty, the instrument is advisory. The Commission is under no obligation to do anything, and actually, I think you said 56? The number keeps growing, good for the citizens, but actually none of them has succeeded. A number have reached the requisite number of signatures from the requisite number of member states. They just get the right to water, for example, is just gathering dust. When I last talked to the Commission about this, which was some months ago, it was very, very clear that they don't want to move on this, and they kept saying, well, it's a young instrument, it's not quite ready yet, give it time. Now, you can read this, I can read this, we can all read this. It's a polite way of saying, go away, leave us alone. We don't want this instrument to work. Why? Well, that's when the politics comes into it. I think, I have no proof, but this is my guess, is that they're quite concerned, the Commission, about a number of the initiatives which they see as right-wing. Mother, father, children. I think it's actually called mum, dad and kids, but I really loathe that populist language. They don't like it. There have been a number of others which have been very successful in terms of gathering the signatures. And the Commission is, well, never they're saying this out loud, but sort of saying, well, we'll just drag our feet. Bureaucratic inertia. We know this. When bureaucracy finds that it encounters something it doesn't like, it doesn't say no, just nothing ever happens. For what it's worth, I actually raised this at the last plenary in connection with the transparency debate, and Vice President Timmermans was there, but I'm afraid I didn't get an answer. I got an answer to something else. Well, that's the way it goes. So in a way, we can say that it ties in, and this is where your political point, I think, is very relevant. It ties in with this rising fear of populism. And if we look at what populism really is, it's about giving citizens a voice. Because very often, the voice of the citizens is not what the Commission wants to hear. I think there's a growing tension over the last X number of years between what the European Union, or at least the institutions of the European Union, think should be done and what a much wider population wants to see done. Now, how do you resolve that tension? Well, one way of resolving it is ignoring it, which I think is what is happening with the European Citizens Initiative. I'm very conscious that there's continuing pressure from civil society. Now, generally, pressure from civil society works very well because we all think civil society is the most wonderful thing since Christmas. But actually, when it comes to the ECI, somehow that's a different kind of civil society. We don't give it quite as much how shall we say, sacred quality as we do, because nobody has ever said there's good civil society and bad civil society. And before
It's
I
just people
finish,
don't ask for what
was one,
Commission
just one
would like them to ask.
Oh, the Commission can have their own voice. But I want to raise one other point, which I think is a very serious one. Wake Up Europe, which was an initiative launched and accepted by the Commission November of last year, so it's just 11 months ago, calling on the Commission to launch an Article 7 procedure against Hungary. Now, this is not, I think, actually acceptable within the legal framework of Article 11 of the treaty, which calls for legislative action. I don't think this is procedural action, but it was accepted. And quite honestly, I think it was I'm going to try and find a polite word for this Wake Up Europe. I think it was a political action. It collapsed after a few months. It got a great deal of publicity when it was launched, that's to say November, December of last year. And I think they threw in the towel, I think in May of this year, I'm not absolutely certain. I think during that time, I think they collected about 11,000 signatures. So it was never a serious initiative at all. That gives the whole ECI a very bad name. And it seems to me that the Commission shouldn't have accepted it.
May I come in at that point?
Let us have these. I would like in this stage, and then we can move on. But first, I would like to give everyone at the table an opportunity to speak or ask the questions. So I would like to have our student from Warsaw to ask a question to the participants, please.
My question is about the people, the regular people. Should we show them or should we convince them that their voice can change something, just like that? Because the European Citizens Initiative, it's, I think, the good way to show people that they can change something, but maybe this is the first thing we should do.
So more about the visibility. That's what you're trying to say.
And about somehow to make a platform to connecting the people from other regions, other countries. And
Okay.
can we somehow make it?
Well, in fact, the ECI is only part of a larger debate, and more than a debate, it is in fact to understand that we have to move towards citizens-centered Europe. It's about the fundamentals of European democracy. And in this way, I believe that what you are saying is, in my view, absolutely right. As long people are disconnected to the institutional decision-making, when it is always a top-down, a technicality debate, then it will be very problematic to connect people with, may I say, the European project. And for this reason, it is about participation, participatory democracy, and there we have to acknowledge that there are already several other instruments we are not using. Not just going in a legalistic way, but we have the horizontal dialogue, we have the vertical dialogue, we have the dialogue on values, all enshrined in the Treaty of Lisbon, but it is not used. By the way, as special advisor, I have an independent position, and I try to argue, and I will do it in a report in the upcoming months, to make clear that it is not about populism only, and we have to make the difference between the debate we really need in Europe, connecting people with the overall project, and it is, in my view, the best argument and the best reply to the populist. And this is the reason why that we have to widen the scope and to see how not to use the citizens, but to connect them, to give them a voice, to give them a place. And If possible, I will not say to be co-legislator, because this is, I think, not the real aim. We have to assess that the European Parliament, the Council, the situation of the Commission, they have their place. But I agree what was said before. In fact, it is strange that even when there are only 3 ECIs going to some stage, that the Commission is not taking on board new ideas, that it is a question of fertilization of the policy making in Europe. It is not the same as going for a co-decision. So, but I think that we have to reverse the place, and we have to see in which way there can be a new trust towards the common aims and goals of the people.
Madam KAUFMANN, people are asking wrong questions?
No, there are too many different issues now on the table. First of all, I have to say to colleague SCHÖPFLIN, I'm fully aware that he didn't like Wake Up Europe Citizens Initiative, but it was not populism. There is a number of citizens all around Europe who are looking what is going on in the member states, in Poland or in Hungary, and they don't like the developments there. So that's their right to make a citizens' initiative. If they are not successful, okay, that's another point. You have the same not successful citizens' initiative. I give you an example. It was 30 kilometers per hour in all our cities. So, I mean, that's an idea of the citizens, but of course they didn't manage to have 1 million signatures, and if they had 1 million signatures, and we had to discuss it in the European Parliament, I'm wondering what was the majority to have such an European legislation to be introduced, because the positions on that concrete issue are very different. And what you have said, the Citizens' Initiative purpose is to give people a voice for their ideas. So, and for example, the right to water was successful. It was successful because we in the European Parliament not only made a hearing, but we had a follow-up in the Environmental Committee, and the European Parliament is still pressing on that issue, right, access to water and water as a human right. So the topic is still there, here in the institution and in the public debate.
Not
and
just
others,
gathering dust.
And others, for example, Stop Vivisection. We had a broad hearing with a lot of participants here in the House, and it showed that this idea of stop any tests on animals for medical reasons was not a majority position for the legislator. And we have to look step by step for what is the topic about. But in general, I think it's not populistic at all. The people are invited to present their ideas. They have to connect with people in different member states and to focus on the issue which is of interest for different people in different member states. And I don't see there any kind of populism in, like Mr. SCHÖPFLIN said before.
Before we get into this,
one sentence, please.
Just one.
Just a response to Mrs. KAUFMANN. My objection to Wake Up Europe was legal and procedural, not political. I'm quite happy for an Article 7 procedure to be started against Hungary.
Yeah.
But getting back to the Citizens' Initiative, yes, indeed, they can be on a very various subjects, I'd say, but the question is, how do we make it more user-friendly? And perhaps the issue is also whether the issues that people can address within this framework are often perceived as distant, complex, something that people are not really interested in, you know, as a lot of the things that actually has to do with the European Union decision-making. I would like to start with you.
I would like to answer our colleague who asked a very specific question. I think it's counterproductive to raise awareness of citizens about the ECI unless it's revised. Because if the instrument doesn't work, and I think it's proven, having more hopes invested in it from a majority of citizens will lead only to more and more frustration and disappointment. I would like also to make another point. Why actually the European Citizen Initiative is so important among all other instruments that we have in the participatory toolbox, like the consultations and all the others? Just because this is the only instrument which is designed for citizens. The European Union is based on the representative democracy principle, and it's fair enough. Therefore, each and every time when there is like a crisis and this issue about the gap between citizens and politicians is brought, all the efforts go towards strengthening all kind of consultative mechanisms which serve to consult with representative interests. And the truth is that we show, I mean, there have been surveys quite a lot through the European Year of Citizens, which indicated that there are 41% of the European citizens who do not want to be represented even by an NGO. They want to speak directly to the decision makers, which does not mean direct democracy. The European Citizens Initiative is not a direct democracy. It's a direct channel to the legislator, provided 1, 2, 3 is fulfilled. But then what comes out is the normal legislative procedure. So for me, there is a gap, and this is why I support so much the idea of the crowdsourcing legislation, which can serve the purpose of hearing and engaging those 41% of citizens, which simply the European Union cannot ignore and pretend that as if they do not exist, because it's a missed opportunity. It's a missed opportunity to engage beyond the usual stakeholders, beyond the organized interest, to solicit really the wisdom of the crowd and especially of youth, which, by the way, it's not that they are not interested in the European issues. They are much interested. It's just that they do not want to participate in the politics as currently practiced. And I think here the European Union is lagging behind into using new technological tools in order to solicit this wisdom which is there and this interest, only listening primarily to the organized interest. I'm not saying that this is not important, it is very important, but we have to be able to accommodate both.
Marju, LAURISTIN.
Thank you. I think that also it is important to understand that the effect or the positive input of this initiative is the biggest in the issues which are solvable on the European Union level. I suppose that there are issues which are concerning really member states and people who are using this kind of initiative to have influence on politics in own home country. And I don't think that that's a proper use of this instrument. And that's also why I think that it's very important that Commission and Parliament also give more information and this kind of open up the problems which could be solved in this way. And water is a very, very good example. And I bring other example. Now, for example, already there are voices raising this issue of changing time twice per year. It's exactly this kind of thing which really is universal. It's not connected with local politics, it's connected with much more general things. And here, I suppose, the input from citizens could be very important to understand the real life situations of people and their attitudes. And also, I suppose it was very important what here was mentioned, that there are many people, especially young people, who really don't care about the politics as usual. And for them to be involved through this process, which would be really new and very attractive way. But for that we have to use also the platforms and also to have debates. It's not only, I repeat, it's not only issue of one-sided communication from citizen to institution. It should be debate and dialogue, and in this course then have citizens' input. And I think the Commission and the Parliament, especially Commission, is not very strong in its dialogue or capacity of willingness to have dialogue and debate with the people. And for that, I mean that maybe also it's important that the role of Parliament will be bigger here. We have a petty committee which is dealing with these things, and quite a good committee. And the role of petty committee and visibility and also the possibilities to use the Parliament to raise issues which could be solved in this way, I suppose should be strengthened.
On the point of user-friendliness of the system, there is something, as a Latvian, I would like to point out. There is a system that actually works quite well on the Latvian level, which is called Mana balss in Latvia, and my voice, or could be translated into English. And that system is actually offers a slightly more simple approach of people trying to, sign up under certain petition. They verify their identity most oftenly using the internet banking, so that you know that the person is the one, and then the initiative, if it gets the right amount of signature, it goes to the parliament for discussion and so on. I can't say that it has been a great success on all of the cases in terms of bringing a change into the political discourse, but at least in terms of user friendliness, it has been praised for such a system. So, do we need to simplify the online platform for people to do this? Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And also really made it more user-friendly for people with disabilities, because this is absolutely missing as a component at present.
Okay.
Yes, and we have asked as Parliament, for example, to reduce the number of required data for a signature. For example, a lot of member states still ask for an ID number, or if you are collecting signatures on the streets, asking people, do you want to sign this or this initiative, but please show me your passport. I mean, that will not function. So we have to think about these things, of course.
Yeah.
Well, this is, I did come up with this idea, it hasn't got very far, of having a European level digital citizenship, which I think is something that will have to come one day. It's part of the whole digital agenda.
Yeah, I support that very much. I repeat what I said earlier. We are really seriously talking about digital single market. But we cannot have it only as a market. We also have to have digital customers, digital consumers, but that means also digital citizens. And that means to have a platforms, to have the knowledge, the skills to use that, and then all these identification issues are much more simpler. There is a Latvian and in other countries also the experience in Estonia everywhere where there is a common usage, for example, of internet banking. Then with that, the identification problem, they are solved in a very appropriate way, and people are used to that, they trust it, and so on. And the problem here is that really this all kind of data which are collected in this way, not digitally, they are also not protected. It's very difficult to ensure protection of this data if they are collected in each country in different ways. They are not the single system and so on.
Yeah.
The digital solutions here are much better.
Yeah,
Okay.
but we have to improve the digital connectivity. This is very clear. But we have to be careful, because for me it is even more important which is the impact of a movement or of an initiative. It is not because you will receive 100,000 clicks, yeah, that there is a real impact of the citizenship in this case. So for me, it is not the one or the other. I think that the digital connectivity can improve, in fact, the participation approach. On the petition, I agree that the committee is quite good, well working, but let's be clear, also the idea or the concept of the ECI was not just a petition. When it was not to go for decision making, it is very clear in Article 11.4 that it could lead, it may lead to new legislation. And so we have to be, let's say, open and to be clear on this point as well, that there is something more in the ECI tool than it is by other tools. And so in this way, the very difficult challenge is how to combine the common European public space with the place of people in their city, in their region, and in their country. And this combination of space and place is about unity and diversity in Europe. And this is the reason why I think that it is not enough to go for some adjustments on the proceedings. One out of the important points is you cannot be judge and party. So for me, from the beginning on that the Commission, who is teased and challenged on new ideas, proposals, and so on, is the one to judge on the receivability and the acceptability of the initiative. So I think that it is one out of the, may I say, major points we have to discuss and to see if it has to be the Parliament, is it a neutral, objective, a group of wise persons, yeah, I don't know. But I think that we cannot remain seeing to the initiative where the Commission has the right to reject, but on the other hand, to be in fact challenged on new ideas. So my point is, we have to readjust some administrative problems and some, but it is, may I say, secondary on the point, which is the essence of, may I say, new participative model connecting people with the project.
We're coming to an end. Our time is coming to an end, and I would still like to give the floor to Camille for another question, please.
That was mentioned that the ECI should be the move to more digital way, but I'm a little bit afraid that there will be voices about the problem with collecting personal data. So the next question is like how we can be 100% sure that it will be safe for every citizen in European Union.
Is there a way to create such a system?
There's
Yes.
no such
If
thing as
it's
100%
centralized,
security, but you can have better security and less good security. But Marju knows much more about this because they've done it very well in Estonia.
As I said, I see it as a development which is inevitable concerning also digital single market, because it's the same thing. The data protection is a general problem and general issue, concerns all kind of digital customers who are using services. It concerns all other digital usages, and it will be the more and more part of everyday life of everybody. And we have this experience in our country where, for example, 85% of people fulfill their tax reports by internet. 100% are using internet banking. Even in small villages where their banks are closed, the older people, they all use internet banking. It's coming. It's experience which is coming, and then trust is coming also. We have made research on that. With the practical usage, the trust is coming, and at the same time, the supervision is developing. Though I suppose it's coming inevitably. In 5 years, I'm sure we will not discuss this point, but we will thus discuss more this kind of content, how to use better this opportunity.
And at the end, basically, one of the underlying questions, and I would want to get a real, more or less yes and no from each of you on this. The question here with this instrument is, indeed, whether Commission actually needs to act, needs to be forced to act whenever something has received 1 million of signatures. Would you say, would that be a way of trying to bring the initiatives a step further, when really there needs to be a legislative proposal once something has submitted, someone has gathered 1 million signatures?
It's a necessary condition, it's not a sufficient condition.
Shouldn't be obliged to come up with a legislative proposal, because this is unique right of the European Commission, should provide arguments if it doesn't, but could use much more instruments in order to follow up of the initiative, even if it's not a legislative proposal. It could be a communication, it could be a debate initiation, it could be a recommendation, and many others. For now, the Commission is shining away.
I think that now the threshold is so high, the 1 million people, 25 countries, it's extraordinary event if it will happen. And I suppose deserves the very, very high level of not only the attention, but also, I suppose, discussion then. Because it is really important that it will raise the issue. It's obviously not something every day. It's something which is extraordinary if we have this kind of participation threshold. And I suppose could be part of the democratic debate.
So
not
discussion, but not legislative proposals?
No, both.
Okay.
Well, why you divide them? Why you divide democracy and legislation?
I'm just trying to understand your point.
It's in the benefit, may I say it in this wording, of the Commission, due to the fact it is in the benefit of the European democracy that the Commission has to act in one way or another. and it has not to be imperatively for legislation, but there are alternative modi to take up the ECI for the purpose. But the other point is, the ones they are not requiring 1 million or whatever the criteria, I think it would be interesting to open some discussion also and to see in which way it can be taken on board. But I repeat, not imperatively going for decision making, institutionally speaking.
Madam KAUFMANN?
Well, if we look at the state of the play, the Commission has to act. That's very clear from the regulation. It has 3 months of time to decide what to do, whether to pick up the proposal or to denounce the proposal. And in between, that from my point is important, in between the Parliament plays a role. Within these 3 months, the Commission has to decide we have to have a hearing here in this House. We invite the organizers, we have a public debate on the issue, like we had with the 3 successful ECIs, and then it's up to the Commission to go further or not. But the Commission has to act. That's the state of the play now already.
But apparently, you know, it has to be more visible. What is the actual that they are doing? I would like to thank all of the participants for being here today with us at the European Parliament. I would also like to thank all the audience here in the Parliament and watching us online and hearing us. This was the Citizen Corner debate on the European Citizens Initiative. My name is Artjoms. See you next time. Thank you.